In this video, you're going to learn beginner painting with light, and you'll be able to do this with the camera you already own and with any flashlight you can buy at a hardware store. Hello, my name is Chris Attrell. I have taught night photography to over 6,000 students all across Western Canada. And tonight, I'm shooting at this abandoned farmhouse in southwest Saskatchewan where I have permission to shoot tonight. First, we're going to cover painting with light tips and tricks. Then we're going to go over equipment and camera settings. To do painting with light, we're going to be doing long exposures in the dark. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to be shooting in manual mode at 25-second exposures, an aperture of 4.0, and my ISO will be set to 1600. These can change depending on your environment. I'm also going to be using manual focus. And of course, my camera's on a tripod. As you can see from these images, painting with light can add a lot of value to your astral landscapes. And it allows you to become an active participant in your own pictures. I have been doing painting with light for almost 10 years now, and I always enjoy it because I feel like I'm an artist, but instead of a paintbrush, I have a flashlight. I'm also going to teach you in a way where you're just taking one image without having to do any Photoshop stacking. I'm not against Photoshop stacking, I just prefer taking one image. And here's tip number 1. Never light from behind the camera. I'll light from behind the camera to take a test shot, but most photographers will stand directly behind the camera and use their flashlight to illuminate the subject in front of them. These are not very good looking pictures. To give your subject a sense of depth and contrast, light from a 45 or 90 degree angle. When you light from the side, you can see the details in this building look a lot better. All you have to do is, once you hit your shutter button, walk 25 or 30 feet to the left or right, and then light the subject. Or have your friend do it. In this picture, you can see the difference between lighting from behind a camera and lighting from an angle. This is the single most important tip. And tip number 2, when I'm lighting most subjects, you notice I'm shaking my flashlight. Shaking the flashlight while you're lighting the subject will prevent what's called hot spotting. Here's what hot spotting looks like. By simply shaking the camera around as you're lighting a subject, you're more likely to get even lighting throughout. And tip number 3, the longer you leave your flashlight on something, the more it'll be lit. Not everything needs to have 30 seconds of light. Sometimes it just needs 1 or 2 seconds. That's part of the experimentation process you get to enjoy when you're doing this. Here's what this building looks like with 3 seconds of light. Here's what it looks like with 10 seconds of light. The amount of light is going to be dependent on the paint color, the texture, and material of the subject that you're shooting. Not everything is the same. White churches only need 1 second of light in most cases. If you're shooting a deadwood building like this abandoned house, you may have to light it for 8 seconds. And of course, it also depends on how bright or dim your flashlight is. But the point is, if you're doing a 25-second exposure, you don't have to shine your flashlight the entire time. And tip number 4, how close and how far away from a subject also plays a big role in how much light is applied to your subject. If I take a 25-second exposure of this building and light it for 5 seconds, and then the next picture, I do the exact same thing, except I double the distance away from the subject. It doesn't cut the light in half. It cuts it by like to 25%. There's a weird mathematical formula for light, and you'll notice it the most by how close and how far away you get from the subject. Sometimes, if you want dimmer light, the best thing to do is just walk further away. Likewise, if you want something brighter, it may just be as simple as get closer. And getting closer and further away also affects the way the light wraps around a building. For the picture of these hoodoos, if I got too close, it didn't really look attractive. So I got further away from the hoodoos and lit it, and it looked better. And tip number 5, you can be in the exposure while you're doing painting with light as long as you're wearing reasonably dark clothes, you keep moving, and don't light yourself. In fact, it's not unusual that I'm in my own exposures. You do have to be careful when you're getting really close to stuff because the reflection can light your face or your hands. But here's an example of me walking around this exposure. But here's what the picture looks like. You never saw me. And if you stop moving too long, you're going to see an outline of your body. You can see from this example, I stood still for 5 seconds, so it created Shadow Man. I like putting Shadow Man in my picture sometimes just for fun, but my wife doesn't like those. And here's what it looks like if you accidentally light yourself. And here's what it looks like if the camera sees your flashlight. But don't be afraid to get into your exposure sometimes if you want to. Just be quick and expect that you might have to do it 2 or 3 or 4 times before you get it right. All summer long, I'm going to be taking my video camera with me and making 4-minute videos of me shooting on location, and I'll be showing you how I paint with light. So please subscribe to my channel if you want to see some of those. Alright, so let's go over camera settings. You're going to have to shoot this in manual mode. On your mode dial on your camera, switch that to M. We're going to set ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. The first value we'll change is ISO. For a beginner, 1600 ISO should work great. The next value we're going to change is aperture. A good beginner aperture is just to set it to the widest possible. When you're doing this kind of photography as a beginner, you should make sure your lens is wide open. That way you can set your aperture value to 3.5. Then the last value to change is shutter speed. Because you want to have enough time to grab your flashlight and walk around these pictures, you just want to set it to 30 seconds. That means you have 30 seconds to hit your shutter button and walk around and do painting with light. This is a reasonable setup for most beginners for their first painting with light shot. If you find your pictures overexposed, simply lower your ISO value. Right now you're at 1600, maybe try shooting at 800 or 400. You're also going to have to focus on your subject. Sometimes you could just get a really bright flashlight and autofocus on it, and then switch your lens to manual focus. But the best method would be to manually focus on the subject. If you've never manually focused in the dark, I made a video called 3 Methods for Manually Focusing in a Dark or Low Light Situation. It's on my channel. You can check it out here. So now you've got your camera set up for your first shot. So let's go over some equipment. I usually have about 7 different flashlights I bring with me. Some are very soft, some are very harsh, some are very bright, some are very dim. My favorite one is this Energizer flashlight. The beam can flip up and down, which is very handy. It's got some legs, and you can adjust the brightness of the beam by holding the button down. This costs about $25, and I put a link to it in the description below. I also bought these clip-on flashlights at the hardware store. When you don't have friends with you, you could just put this clip-on flashlight onto a tree and have some continuous lighting. I also got some of these flashlights with a focus beam. This way I can focus right in on some details. These are very handy for like old abandoned cars and trucks and anything metal. And of course there's the head flashlight, but I don't really use this one that much. Some people use it a lot. You don't need to have this many flashlights, but the more you have, the better, depending on what you want to light up. Don't buy your flashlights from the checkout line at grocery stores. Those ones won't work out very good. You're going to need a tripod. You probably know that by now. And I highly recommend you don't buy the cheapest tripod you can find. Get a reasonably good one that's easy to set up. I put a link to a good value one in the description below. You're also going to need a mirrorless or DSLR camera with a lens that can be focused manually. You don't even need to have an expensive camera or lens. All these pictures that you see in this class are done with an entry-level Canon M50 with the kit lens that came with it. This thing does a remarkable job, and I really like it because it's small and it's got the flip screen, which is very helpful at night. Now, a lot of people ask me how I light the inside of these buildings. There's two ways to do it. Sometimes I put this yellow cellophane wrap over my flashlights because all these flashlights put out a cool temperature. So if you want a warm temperature, just a simple piece of cellophane wrap over your flashlight will give it that beautiful amber look. So I'll tape it over my flashlight and I'll send my friend into the house to go light the inside while I'm shooting outside. But sometimes I don't have a friend with me and I'm not going to go inside that abandoned house by myself. These tea lights do a great job. If your friend was in that house, you can have them light the inside for 2 seconds to get the same amount of light as this tea light does in 25-second exposure. I just take one of these and throw it into the attic. Then I take another one and throw it into the main floor, and it puts out enough light so that you can see it in your photos. Because it's kind of difficult to get your friend to want to go into the attic in the middle of the night and use a flashlight to light it for you. But once I throw the tea light in, I'm not going back inside to get it. It's just going to stay there. It won't burn the house down or harm animals. So here's a whole bunch of pictures using what I just taught you. You notice in this picture the headlights look lit? It's because I walked right up to them and turned my flashlight on and off in half a second. And I'm pretty much moving around this picture the whole time. I even do it indoors sometime. You see in this picture, it's a 30-second exposure of me walking around this room lighting things. You can see down here I accidentally lit my foot. And up here I lit my hand. If you happen to get a really cool shot using painting with light techniques I just taught you, please tag me on Instagram when you post your picture. If you have a question or a comment or suggestion, leave it in the comment section below. And please subscribe to my channel if you want to see a whole bunch more low light night photography tutorial videos I'll be posting this summer and fall. Everything I taught in this video is meant for beginners. Once you get some experience, then you can do stuff like taking 10-minute exposures with a release cable or getting better lights. And here is a tip for my wife. When you're going to go shooting at night, especially in summer, if you forget your bug spray, you're going to have a big problem with mosquitoes like I am right now. Always make sure you've got mosquito repellent with you when you're going to be shooting at night. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.